Well, here I am, folks, your no nonsense modern guru. Studied many different religions and mythology, psychology, and looked for overlaps in terms of many different fields. I have a list of things I'm going to try to cover right now, and I hope that it comes out well. First of all, I'm going to entitle this Understanding the Power of Myth and the Modern Gurus, but it's going to cover a little more than that. First point that I'm going to make is I'd like to point out that there are four major religions, and as far as I know, and try to integrate that between common sense and the particular perspective that I have in my form of inner yoga, which I'm apt to call transcendent love integration. It's a different process than many, but it also integrates a number of different approaches, basic approaches, both in yoga and I believe in modern psychology. The major religions. This is fascinating. The whole evolution of religion and the value of myth itself. Sorry about the hands. It fascinates me, and what I've seen is that, first of all, let me detail what I believe are four major religions that seem to coincide with the four major elements in the yoga that I teach. As you may know from watching earlier presentations of mine, I believe in the connection between your conscious agency self and an interface for the brain, which I call the artist, the creative perspective in us, which can move outside of our dramatic timeline and see ourselves as others see us, or at least make an attempt. And the objectivity perspective, which helps us move from the present into the future with less anxiety and more purpose, and the empathy, which helps us to embrace things that are important in our social lives that condition how we are today, and also help us to heal. The reason I see the empathy is so very important is that it helps us feel strong. So it does help with the process which I call unlearning helplessness around needs, feelings, and their expression due to forms of trauma, usual, or bad conditioning, perhaps, sometimes. So there are those three perspectives, and then what integrates them all is that dramatic self in us, which is much more emotional. Integrates these things through an interchange which builds trust. All of these things are interdependent. They have to be united in our sense of our everyday self. And this integration is also an integration of virtue. And the trust grows and the virtues grow as the communication grows. From empathy, goodness, from objectivity, truth. Not just, I feel like that might be true. No, it's not. Objectivity is another thing, more scientific approach to things, more logical. And then there's creativity. From that we get art, which I said before is the virtue that allows us to appreciate the goodness and the benefit in things, no matter what's going on. And so it takes becoming more artful, more empathetic, more objective is very helpful. And what are these things? How did they evolve? Well, they're ways in our social interactions through which we get our needs met. These social interactions are very much attached to language. Then there are things below that which help us connect in a bodily way to ourselves more, to our sensations and that part of us which is not an ego so much. It's just a sense of our physical self, our health. And I talk about what warps that, and we'll go, that'll be later on in the presentation, but right now, the four major religions as I see them are Hinduism and Islam and Christianity and Buddhism. And these are four major religions. Of course, there are many, many religions. I don't know that all of them will fit so neatly into my perspective, but here's my perspective. Each of the 4 points that I mentioned seem to connect to the basic, more overriding approach or understanding of each of those religions. The figure and I move toward figures. We relate to faces, we relate to people, we see faces everywhere, even where they're not. But there may not be faces here, but I'm going to give you a face for now. The trust aspect, well, that was the teaching of Islam. It's all about trusting in that, some sense of that, what in yoga would be the higher self, or the interface between that and Brahman, the universe, the supreme, known and unknowable, perhaps, which many religions call God. Well, their main point is trust. Remember, this has to do with meeting your needs in a society. So with Hinduism, Krishna is a major figure, and whereas Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a major figure in Islam. A major figure in Hinduism is Krishna. And Krishna, in terms of Krishna's relationship to the world, to society, is that he was God at play. So he was very artful. He was very creative. So he was at play in the world. And in his essence, when we're being creative, we are at play. So, I think there's something important there. Part of the reason that religion evolved. It's a necessary perspective in society. That doesn't mean any of these religions, the religions as wholes, don't engage all of these elements to some degree. They do. No organization is totally without the other aspects. But there's a basic emphasis that seems to develop. Now with Christianity, a lot of it's empathy. And even Islam talks about this, even though these very caring people. Empathy. No one loves more than this, Jesus says, than if he will lay down his life for a friend. Ultimate empathy. So empathy is the focus of Christianity, I think. Buddhism is about objectivity. The whole philosophy is anatta. No continuing, unchanging self or soul. And realizing that. It's a very objective kind of approach. I may just skip through some of these things quickly. And, they're also interrelated. Okay, so you have this picture. And so you see the big picture in society. You have this image there of you, the dramatic self, experiencing life more directly and emotionally, interacting with all of these ways of meeting human need, which also connect us to society. So, I make what you will of that. Point 2. The evolution of my inner yoga concepts, their warping due to trauma, and their influence in the development of religions and governments. Okay. Well, the verbal part of my teachings are about, they evolved. There are many minds greater than my own, probably. They evolved. The evolution of society and any particular species is all about survival. And that which works is that, and that which fits in the bigger picture is that which survives. And these perspectives, they're only growing as we experience broader and broader communication between ourselves and others. Empathy is expanding. Objectivity, science is expanding. Art is expanding. And the trust, believe it or not, is expanding. We're less violent than we've ever been, having found other pathways to meet needs that are perhaps more efficient, which does involve these perspectives. So, also the relief from stress is important, and connecting to these things, it helps with stress. You deal with anxieties better. Anxieties from the past or from the future. And the overall, what do you want to say, background noise of stress that just comes from being alive, that is helped by getting outside of the drama of your life and appreciating it. Yeah, appreciating all that has happened and will happen to you, as anyone would appreciate vicariously a movie. And so this higher self is connecting with your dramatic self in this way, and this relates to religion in the sense of the God-man concept, the higher social enlightenment, connecting up with individual human beings. There's a connection there. It's higher, but it's integrated with us. The four Vedas talk about this. In all the four Vedas, there's some kind of a phrase that mentions this union. And one of them is Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahman. I have this connection. I am one with this universe that I live in. Well, yeah. Let's see. So the evolution of society and language is connected to these perspectives, and it's mirrored in our mythologies and our religions. Let's see. Now, development of religions, obviously there was a need for people to get along, and so it's easy to see how these concepts and this realization of these things grew through the myths and the religions. And I mentioned governments. It seems to me that there is a parallel between this dramatic self in ourselves, which is very much involved with survival, and basic social organizations. Let us call them businesses. Business is about trade, and trade requires trust. You don't, a lot of trust. You hand someone a piece of paper, that says you have so much, that it has so much worth. Well, on the face of it, it's a piece of paper. But we moved away from gold, which had a little bit more solid value in itself, to something that required quite a bit of trust, and people who own money. There's an art to trust, and so it's very much about trust. It's very much about, similar to that dramatic self in ourselves, which is more directly experiencing the struggles in life, the trading that we have to do to survive. Now, just as that dramatic self in ourselves is educated and enriched by connection to empathy, objectivity, and creativity, business is enriched by three other types of organizations. Extended family organizations, which would include your churches and temples, and sometimes your favorite bar. But these extended family organizations, they are very much in the fact that they try to support family, and family relations are very much about empathy. So I see a connection there. And obviously, there's, in a church, there's the business of the church, and there's the artful presentation of the church, and the objective problem solving that the church has to do, but its main feature is the empathy. In business, the main feature is trade, and whether it's communication or whatever. Now, government requires a lot of objectivity, or a focus on that. Objectively, what can we do? What should be the rules of society? Religions, they have that in them, but it's not the major feature, I don't think, generally. It's an offshoot, connected, but not the emphasis, the main emphasis. In government, all these things exist, yes, but the main emphasis is to be more objective than understanding, so that we are being guided into the future, future that is more productive, and that we don't accumulate too much debt. We listen to the scientists about what will happen if we do this or if we do that, and how long we can get away with things. But that's objective. Obviously, businesses are benefited by an association with that. Big time. Business is also benefited by the media. The media is the more creative organizations, presenting, even in the news, different perspectives, and that's how I define creativity. It's an integration of many perspectives. And, the media gives us many perspectives and many integrations of those perspectives. And whether it's the news or presenting the arts or the theater or movies or whatever, that is very much a creative endeavor, and in my perspective, and benefits business or trade or our normal everyday lives. It's trading partners. There's one thing now. What warps all of these things? Well, there are a lot of things. and you could probably think of quite a few yourself. But in this practice, and in this perspective, one thing stands out, and that's trauma. Or learned helplessness around needs, feelings, and their expression. There are things that had so much helplessness involved with them that the anxiety attached would have sickened us or possibly killed us, or at least it was perceived that way at the time. And so the brain has this amazing ability to turn that anxiety into symbolic fixes, struggles for symbols of the need instead of the need itself, things that are attainable. So this warping and the degree of it, of course, has to do with the initial impact or strength of the trauma or helplessness. So the more of that anxiety, helplessness that you have from an incident or a string of incidents whereby you came finally to experience as helplessness. These things have an impact, like the force, picture force hitting a balloon, and the balloon is stationary. Well, that shock wave generalizes. It's spread out. So the initial message is generalized and symbolized, and to the degree of the force, it is more bizarrely perhaps symbolized or generalized. The fear of the cat could become fear of all cats, when in objective terms it was just a cat, or perhaps not as dangerous as we thought. But yeah, and you laugh, but the sudden, the small infant, some things can be quite frightening that later would not bother us at all. I can remember at a Walmart where they had this Halloween display where the creature was seen to take its head and remove it from its body. I warned them, and I said, this is not a good idea. Very small children may react badly to this, and they, of course, poo-pooed everything that I sent them. Later on, they had to get rid of it because it did. it frightened the small children. Like, come on. But yeah. So that's what warps it all. And why does it warp it? Well, how does it warp it? It's a kind of greed for power, a greed for money. You just can't get enough. Obviously, you can't fill up on a symbol. There's no satiation. It's only temporary relief. So once you get a lot of money, then, well, I better get a lot more money. I could lose that money. just doesn't feel safe yet. So they keep wanting more and more, and that partly why, as they say, power corrupts, because of the greed factor. And otherwise, it doesn't always. There are kindly kings that have occurred. But the problem with that is the king dies. Oh. So we have a great system of checks and balances in the United States, which is great for personal rights and so on. I would have to say it has a kind of yoga of its own that's working pretty well, even through this last debacle. So, that's it. You need checks and balances. That's another point. You don't, just one of these perspectives alone is not enough. You can, you need all of these things working together. I believe I'll go into more depth on that. Unlearning pathway and deeper levels. Yeah, what is the unlearning pathway? Well, first of all, you have to feel the trauma in the original trauma in its helplessness, the needs and the feelings that were blocked, that once you were helpless to express. You have to feel it along with the helplessness attached, so that you're unlearning the helplessness around that feeling and expression. Once you've done that, to whatever degree, then you will discover that the things you've been reacting to are actually losses, things you lost, but that did not kill you, but they were things that you lost. And so then the grieving process sets in. This is the pathway. And once you've grieved, that's a whole other study in the process, but once you've grieved, then you can truly forgive from your heart, not in some superficial, symbolic way that gives you some sense of relief, but really isn't heartfelt. I have to remember someone I met once who took the Christian admonition to forgive, but he didn't go through that process. He would go up to people and say, "I forgive you," in the most angry tones. And sometimes they wouldn't even know what they did to offend him. So, yeah, that's not the complete package in forgiveness. So forgiveness, you have to grieve the loss, or it's not really fully there. And once you've forgiven, the next step is when we feel remorse, because that hurt in ourselves, that symbolic acting out, is bound to hurt somebody. So we then begin to feel remorse, and that is the most terrible thing of all to feel. And a punishing attitude causes people to do that before any of the other things have occurred. They occur more in a sequence that way. They tend to. So the remorse is a beautiful thing, because When that occurs, then your identity as having been that person is weakened, and you see that actually you're no longer that person. Some religions talk about being born again and things like that. Well, kind of. So that's the process, and it goes from a lighter level to a deeper level, to more verbal things, deeper into the nonverbal area, because you're going back in the development of the brain gradually, so that you can have a basis of comfort and security from which to grow and to integrate. You have to have enough security in the present in order to take those initial steps, and that can be given even for a moment with a therapist. The daily benefit in smaller pathways. Well, let's diverge a little bit from that moment for a moment. And what are the benefits daily? I mean, you don't do this entire practice as a rule all the time. You do it when you have time and when it seems appropriate. It's quite a workout. So what can you do along the way to secure benefits? Well, one is to, you can talk to yourself. You can picture yourself outside of who you are, and even visually in some sense, and just get a sense of what's going on with you. You can try to be objective about your feelings and empathetic about your feelings. And actually, this is a practice of emotional intelligence that we can do daily and grow from, that is related to this, but doesn't go into the deep depths of learned helplessness. And so you can keep something going there. 5. The power of repetition. Areas needing, possibly benefiting from research. Yeah. Well, obviously, if there's I call it a halo effect, and sometimes you can come out of an experience, and the first thing you think is, wow, the next Buddha has arisen. I have so many insights now, and I'm such a much better person. Well, it doesn't happen in that magical kind of way. There's some change that's permanent in some cases. Then there's change which has to be integrated into your life, and that takes a little while. And so you need to keep repeating, because just like you stretch a rubber band and it goes back, and keep stretching it, eventually it may retain a new shape. It takes repetition to change who you are. It takes a change in habits, and areas of that can benefit from research, definitely. Well, they're the chemical analyses of the brain, how it functions, and so on, obviously will be beneficial to the development of any practice involved with these concepts. Again, your greatest gurus are your scientists and your psychologists and your psychiatrists, perhaps, today. Um, and then you've got some people like me out there that are in the, more of the mythological field, and teaching things that can be helpful and open people to these great gurus. And yeah, this is things that you can do to help yourself. And if someone's not helping themselves, it can be really hard to help them from the outside. So this is to accomplish that. Definitely research is helpful. Areas of research. Well, there's a kind of trauma that comes about after a situation repeats itself many times. We need research into how many times that repetition has to occur. We could look into the chemical changes that occur at the time of a trauma, and possible chemical solution to the avoidance of an imprint from that trauma. That's an area of research where this could, be benefited. The type of individual that best helps this other individual, how many therapists should be involved, because I'm not fond of guru worship, and guru just means teacher, guider to the light, is someone in the field of mythology who guides you to a deeper inner enlightenment. Really not a big deal. It's the person isn't perfect. I've never met a perfect person. If I did, I think that'd scare me. But there's a lot of how many people are the research should be in. How often should you change, for instance, a therapist or a practitioner of this to get the best results for an individual? To what extent should the person choose who helps them? It may depend on the degree of damage that's there, and a lot of other things. So these are areas that could be improved. The initial impacts of practice and the need for slow integration or well-integrated creative approaches. Yeah. People have survival networks, and they can be very warped themselves, and extricating yourself from those things will take some social intervention sometimes, and you're going to need to integrate these processes very slowly, because if you suddenly disconnect from your warped but working survival plan, that can cause side effects. So don't expect that you can change all by yourself and the people around you aren't going to change. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for the feeling of loss that will occur when you finally decide that, well, as a partner, I might rather be with someone that doesn't smoke, and am I willing to go that far? I mean, if you're with people who don't want to help themselves and aren't trying to do anything for themselves, they may yet have a big part to play in how you survive. An addiction to a fundamentalist religion, for instance, you're going to have some time to move out of that. Now, when it's critical that you move quickly, you're going to need some creativity, and that might better come from some people outside of yourself. This inner yoga, I mean, it's not all inner. The inner and the outer merge, the interplay. Someone who thinks that you're going to go to a mountaintop and have massive revelations and preach to the world, they're frauds. Doesn't work that way. It's a cool idea. It's symbolic of taking the perspective of what I call the artist, or the creative perspective, and it's kind of cool that way. But you don't have to go to an actual mountain in the first place, and one experience does not make you the presence of divinity on earth. 7. Connecting to your brain, the need for an interface. Oh, yeah. Well, the creative part is an interface. The creative perspective is an interface that we have. The closest we're probably going to get to interfacing with our mysterious brain, in which our total idea of an experience of the universe is housed and told to us daily. And the part of us that, and they've done research, has made the decision before we're conscious of having made it. So there's a need for an interface, and that interface is that creative perspective in which you get outside of your timeline, your dramatic timeline, and get a big picture, create new pictures and new visions. About as close as you're going to get between an inner connection to the brain from your conscious agency self. And important thing there. Let's see. 8. Consciousness. What is it? What does the practice do to connect? I don't know if that last question is a proper question. It's consciousness is not an amount, although there are degrees, I suppose. Consciousness is a feedback loop, and I've had this thought for many years, and then found out that Michio Kaku, who I'm not worthy, he's a brilliant man, and he said that too. And then I said, might be something to this. I believe it's a feedback loop between our conscious agency self that helps us to survive, and the brain that basically created us slowly as it interchanged with the world around us. So, and the brain, well, the body may play a part as well. There are different kinds of memory. We're discovering more and more. So it's a little more complicated than that, but for now, that's my perspective on it. How does the practice relate to that? Well, you're creating a feedback loop. In the case of connecting to empathy, you're connecting to others in your life, those you care about, or who you should care about, people who care about you or should care about you. You're having an inner dialogue with these folks, which is important. Um, there's an inner dialogue between the kid in you, the more emotional, dramatic self. Can be it's a bit of a kid, and not a literal kid. But, it needs the more grown-up part of us, the part of us that tends to be more objective, in order to deal with things day to day and move forward, and to cope with anxieties about the future. That's a feedback loop. You basically, like in a dream, you're playing all the roles. You're playing all the roles. And with the creative perspective, of course, you're interchanging, having a feedback loop between that part of you that can create experiences for you, that can get outside of your experience and your timeline and view you. In emotional intelligence, that's self-awareness. Emotional intelligence and the other feedback loop between yourself and that more mature objective self is self-control. That's simplistic, but basically. Now, the other aspect of emotional intelligence, of course, is empathy, and that's that feedback loop. So, in a sense, this is a way of developing emotional intelligence as well. It goes a little farther. There are connections to the nonverbal techniques as well. It's another kind of feedback loop. The three basic yogas is that mythology presents us with three approaches that are nonverbal. One using breath, prana, another using sound, mantra, and one using concentration, which is dhyana. And the dhyana is very important to being objective. Calm mind. Calm down, think. Right? The prana tends to open feelings, and people are breathing very shallowly. If you catch that, you realize they're feeling, they're repressing feelings. They're feeling afraid, or possibly, it could turn to anger, but their shallow breathing represses feeling. Deeper breathing opens up feeling. So if you want to open the feelings, there are different ways of doing that, and I've talked about that. That relates more to empathy, which also opens up more feelings, more deeper feelings, because you're into the feeling, not talking about feelings as you would in the dialogue between yourself and objectivity. And it's not that you're above that direct experience of empathy that empathy gives and prana gives. It's above it. Looking down, appreciating. So both empathy and prana put you more in touch directly with your feelings. So the breath is an important thing in relationship to empathy. and feeling. Each are important to that. Now, mantra, sound. If you use sound in a way that doesn't involve words and language, or you repeat something that has a meaning until it has no meaning, you are getting above that sense of who you are and what you feel. A little bit. You're getting outside of you're opening yourself to other perspectives. Music does that, makes new connections. Sound can be used that way. And it undermining language makes you able to get out of boxes of experience. So it gets you above your feelings and so on. Brings you into you get pretty high. You can feel the kind of bliss involved in that experience where you're away from the drama and experiencing it directly, and yet still in the drama. It's a necessary feedback loop. Of course, it's not total. But that and creativity are definitely connected. So, all of these things connect. It's best to, there are different ways to practice it, nuance it for individuals. We can go into that at another time. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I'll part with a little mythology of my own. That envision the artist reaching into your past as empathy and into your future as objectivity, relieving your anxieties. Two arms, and when they embrace you in this love, you're in heaven. Time stands still. The trumpet of the Lord is sounded, and time is no more. And a new day opens bright and clear. So, that said, we'll talk again later. Please leave your comments and questions so that I know what it is that I need to do better at in terms of explaining things. As is said in yoga, to honor that creative in all of us, that oneness that we all share with the universe. Namaste.